Gold is back above 1,500. The Fed meets next week. Rate cut? No rate cut. WeWork and the parallels to the junior mining space. Will dig into that. Troops are being sent to Syria to protect the people? No, to protect the oil. Congratulations, America. The federal deficit has hit its highest mark in 7 years. But everything is awesome, right? We're going to talk fucking priest. We're going to talk good priest. We're going to talk good cops. We're going to talk bad cops. And I'm going to share my story. I thought I accidentally joined Tinder. You'll get a kick out of this one, Nick. This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is is this 41, Mr. Hodge?
Oh my goodness, it's almost a year. I can't believe it.
Episode 41 of Bizarro World. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing very well, Gerardo. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. Everybody knows we record this on a Friday. It's been a busy week for the both of us. Conference season is here. You are on your way to San Francisco, and then we are on our way to New Orleans. If anyone is out there, stop by and say hello. A lot to get to, so let's get to it. Gold is back above 1,500, and despite my calls for it to continue lower, it's been pretty resilient. There's a lot going on globally, obviously. We're going to get into the global protests. We're going to get into Brexit and how the people's vote really doesn't matter anymore, apparently, which is a large reason why people are protesting around the world. But man, gold has been incredibly resilient. 1,500 looks like it's the new floor. The juniors could care less. The majors and some of the producing mid-tiers have largely been the beneficiaries of this price move, of course, because they have leverage to the price of gold as opposed to the explorers, which only have a pipe dream most times, right? So let's talk about it. Any thoughts, Nick?
Gosh, gold is really strong. You know, we've been talking about it a lot lately, and we've felt some weakness. I think you called it the most bearish bull market ever, right? And that's attributable to, I think, the junior equities that you and I tend to primarily follow. Some of those have been, well, let's face it, they've been incredibly weak. But if you sort of don't look at the individual trees and you zoom back a little bit and you look at, gosh, a whole cadre of things. If you look at gold in Canadian dollars, which is like at 2,000 Canadian dollars, or if you look at it in Australian dollars or British pounds or Mexican peso, gold is extremely strong and has been setting records. And then if you look at some of the companies that benefit from that because they're actually producing, so their costs are at one level and the price of the product they're selling has been incredibly strong, you've seen very good stock performance. Companies like Agnico Eagle, who had good earnings this week, or the Sibanyes of the world and the Anglo Gold Ashantis that are up some 100 to 150% over the past 12 months. But then you look at some of the companies that we follow and have mentioned, and these are quality names. These aren't, by any means bad management teams or bad share structures or bad jurisdictions. I'm talking about the development stories that are on the verge of permitting, the Almadens and the Midas Golds of the world. They're at very weak states. In the case of Midas, a 52-week low. And so there's just been a giant disconnect between what's positive and what's working in the gold space and what's not working yet. And I think "yet" is a very important word there because as I sift through the data, and it doesn't feel really good to, last week we talked about Millrock. Well, I've written checks for Millrock at 30 cents, and I also wrote a check for Millrock at 7 cents. Don't get me wrong, but I've got people in the industry emailing me, "Hey, are you still involved in Millrock? It's done very good. Did you see the chart this week? It's up to 15 cents. And I just think to myself,
it's doubled in a week. It's doubled in a week and a half off of exclusively off what we told you would happen. We told you this months ago. We told you this massive land package in Alaska was a district scale play that would attract the attention of somebody that would invest large sums of money to develop this because it could become a gold mining camp, and nobody cared at 6 cents or 7 cents. You were intelligent enough to write a check. You were also smart enough to offer it to your subscribers. And they're up over 100%. That came with a full warrant.
That's correct. But then you pull the chart back and you see where Midas was A year ago.
Millrock. Millrock,
Sorry,
right.
Millrock, where Millrock was a year ago, and it doesn't feel so good that I wrote a check at 30 cents because it still needs to double to get there. And that's sort of the disconnect I'm describing. It's not that I don't think Millrock will get there. I think it's just a bit, well, a couple of things. It's a bit early for self-congratulations, I think. Um, and the things that need to play out for these quality juniors and developers to rise haven't yet. And we can talk about that if you want. The things that are circling around in my mind are the very real need for majors to replenish reserves. So those companies that have quality resources are going to have to get bought up. And then just the utter consolidation in the space that has to happen because of the not so good things that we talk about, the excessive compensation and you know, high cost of operation and not so great share structures and the high G&A costs. Some of that has to go bye bye, and there has to be some consolidation and quite frankly a purging of the not so good companies. So you can convince institutions and M&A players to come in, right? And that's some of the stuff that needs to happen for the juniors to go up. And now I'll shut my mouth.
I read your most recent edition of Early Advantage this week, which is, of course, one of the premium newsletter services that you manage and direct and write and oversee. And you talked about the animals in the space. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? I thought it was very well written, well thought out. I thought it was as factual because of math and facts as it could possibly be. And I think it's an example of why people are hesitant to speculate in the space because of things like that. Would you like me to provide an overview?
Yeah, you can provide an overview and I can give some details. And it's funny that you think it's well thought out because, I start those at about after I have my coffee on Thursday morning and I'm done by lunch. So it's very, very much stream of conscience. I'm glad it comes across as well thought out.
That's actually usually where some of the best writing is done, right?
Oh, I think so too, because it's well, top of mind, what I'm thinking and oftentimes what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing from others in the space as well. And so, yeah, if you want to provide an overview and I can fill in the holes if you'd like.
Let's do it. There's a company called Berrien Mining. I am familiar with some of the principles of that company. I am invested in other companies where the management has been involved in, and there are people in that company that we are friendly to and with. However, facts are facts. This is a group that's been promoting a property that was just being promoted last year. Now, this happens, and there is nothing wrong. I'll give you my 2 cents. There's nothing wrong with seeing potential in a property and hypothesizing that the other geologists that drilled it, despite regardless of how much success they've had, just missed something, or that you have a fresh approach that could yield something. That's a valid approach. Nothing wrong with that. So I like management companies that promote their story. I like management companies that take a fresh approach to things. It's exploration. Nothing wrong with that. I take big issue, as do you, and I'll let you go ahead and talk about it here in just a second. When a company is set up, we were taught that share structure tells you a lot about what the intent of the company is, right? You have companies that are set up to explore and make a discovery. You have companies that are set up to develop an asset. And then you have companies that are just set up to make the founders of the company rich. And in this case, without putting words in their mouth, the actions and the share structure of this company scream, all we want to do is flip our cheap paper. And I'll let you tell people just how cheap the paper they allocated themselves was.
Well, and in the case of this company, Berrien as well, it's not like the founders have deep geologic experience or are geologists. My take is that they come more from the family money, family office, IR side of the business and have seen how getting cheap paper can make you very wealthy very quickly. And so it's not my belief. And again, don't want to put words in the company's mouth. They can come on here and talk to us about it if they want. But, I think they acquired this Bolo property simply as a promote. And then some of the promotions I've seen from the company, the things that they paid for it to be written, et cetera, just further underscore that belief in my mind. And then so, so that's the first negative against them, right? That was like the first thing I saw. I see this promotion come across my desk about the number one gold stock you have to own. And so I click it, and it's about this Bolo property. And I'm like, hey, wait, I know the Bolo property because helped finance Allegiant Gold last year to drill this Bolo property. And surprise, surprise, essentially dusters. And that was with a geologist named Andy Wallace, who is very successful, specifically in Nevada, where this property is, and has identified several economic deposits that have gone on to be mines. And so Allegiant drilled it last year under his leadership and guidance, came up dry. And so I'm just scratching my head when I see this, like, come on, you got to be kidding me. This is the number one asset I have to own, the one where Allegiant Gold just went from 40 cents to 8 cents on or whatever is their flagship, and we're quick to option it out to this company that is now burying gold. And then so I start my digging, right? And the thing that really got me was the share structure. As you said, I go to the original prospectus from when the deal was put together, and I see who paid what for their shares. And lo and behold, the founders gave themselves 4 million shares at a tenth of a penny. That's 0.001 dollars, right? It's not even 1 penny per share. And so they paid $4,000 for 4 million shares. And if you look at the outstanding shares now, that's like 9% of the company. And so they paid $4,000 for 9% of the company. And that really, as you indicated, tells you all you need to know about their purposes, right? I mean, it's a house of cards built on sand. There's no strong hands there. There's only, in my mind, at least, incentive to come off your cheap paper. And you sort of saw that this week, right? They did the whole charade. They did the whole halt the stock to put out drill results that were supposed to be flashy, and a new discovery that wasn't really a new discovery. It was just an extension of holes that Allegiant had drilled just a zone below them, and I think they thought the stock was going to go up when they did that, but in fact, the stock traded over 2 million shares and went down by like a nickel, and that's attributable in my mind to that share structure. And so just think about that.
And let me cut in really quick and ask you a question, because this is important, right? At what price point, ballpark it, did those couple of million shares trade?
Oh, it was 20 cents.
So you multiply 1/10 of a penny. Do the math, right? If you're able to get your shares off, and I'm not saying they did this, I would hope they did not. Whether those shares are registered or not, we can have a conversation. I'm happy to have it on air with them. Open mic, open door policy. We're accountable the way we expect everybody else to be accountable, and nobody's perfect here. But I would hope that whether those shares are reported or not, or registered or in the company principals' names, that they didn't sell into the promotion and into those results at 20 cents.
But they're already up 20,000%.
And that's the problem. Whether or not they did, the appearance of impropriety is hard to argue against when almost 10% of the outstanding shares of the company were allocated to yourselves at 1/10 of a penny. We know this is a high risk, high reward sector. We know founders take an extra risk. We understand that they went and got this asset, but it has to be somewhat proportionate. The risk taking that you're asking the people that wrote a check at higher prices, real prices, has to be somewhat in line with the risk that you're taking. Shouldn't it be?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the next raise was done at
20,000%.
Right, exactly right. And so, what the appearances are for sure. And it's not a one-off thing. So Mr. Sally is also a founder of a company called Defense Metals Corp. And I went peeking around their filings as well. And surprise, surprise, he got 3 million shares issued in that company at the same exact price, 0.001 cent. And so look at the chart of that company and see how it's been going as well.
And again, I don't know Max personally. We've been on site visits together. Shareholder of a company he was involved with, Advantage Lithium. which has had some share structure problems of its own, an amazing asset with a net present value of approximately, and this is a pre-feasibility study asset, level stage asset. I believe it's like 675 million US after
Correct.
tax, and yet has a market cap somewhere in the 32, 33 million Canadian range. So again, this is not a one-off. So Max, when we say your name and, cite your company, you're more than welcome to come on to the show and talk to us about, why it was structured that way and the risk that you took in order to make that happen. And please enlighten us if we're absolutely way off on this thing. But I don't think anybody, including Max, could argue that it doesn't look good.
It does not look good. And I'll speak to Advantage even for a second as a shareholder and someone who supported that company as well. I was not a supporter of that company when it was put together, specifically because of the deal structure. And if you put on your hat and your time transport hat and go back 3 years, we had this lithium mania thing going on, and Advantage ended up securing the asset that you speak of, Calchari, and became a JV partner with one of the few lithium producers in the world, Ordo Cobre. And to me, that signified their ability to make deals and get things done, which was what brought me into that deal because A, the stock was running. B, there was a bunch of people trying to get that asset. I remember this very well because I had financed a couple of them. And Advantage emerged victorious. But look here now, 2.5 or 3 years later, where the stock is coming. Granted, um, the entire lithium space has been soft. The lithium carbonate price has come off. All the producers are down, the Albemarles, the SQMs, the Orocobres. But you have to think that, and an Advantage certainly has come off at 22 cents. You have to think that a bit more sound share structure going back to 2016 would have helped them, be a bit more buoyant in these tough times, which is what a good share structure helps you do, right? Because now they're scrambling to raise money. They're at the PFS stage. They're going to have to go seek project finance soon. The jurisdiction has dealt them blows with Argentinian elections this Sunday, in fact, on the 27th. And so I don't know. I'm just rambling, but if you had a bit more sound share structure from inception, you might be able to, pick your cliche, weather this storm a bit better.
Is WeWork the junior mining space?
Oh, that's a perfect relation. I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, I mean,
A
just
very smart gentleman mentioned that to me earlier.
just think about it, right? You have
His name is Nick Hodge.
you have you have Adam Newman this week, right? Who just lit $10 billion of SoftBank's money on fire, and SoftBank paid him 1.7 or 1.5 billion dollars for the privilege, right? Just to go away. And I'm thinking to myself, it's this kind of largesse and it's this kind of executive compensation and it's
Mm,
this, and they're going to lay off hundreds of workers, right? While the CEO gets to walk
mm,
away scot free. And it's like, it's the same thing. It's just like a mining executives giving themselves 4 million shares at a tenth of a penny, and then either dumping that paper or not doing much to facilitate true growth and development of their company. And it's why people have disdain for people like Adam Newman, and it's why people have disdain for certain people in the junior mining sector. And then, if you want me to take that comparison even a step further, you have the situation in Silicon Valley where everybody wants to get out, right? The IPOs aren't doing it anymore because none of these companies are profitable. Spotify's not profitable, Uber's not profitable, Peloton's not profitable, right? And so
Peloton.
yeah, exactly
Peloton.
right. All the value gets gobbled up early by the people who finance it privately and then who dump their shares on the retail market in the IPO. And this was proven with WeWork, with um, Goldman Sachs was like dumping their private positions while they were consulting with WeWork to go public, right? And so it's the same thing in junior mining, just on a much smaller scale, and that's what gives people a really bad taste.
So let me ask you this. When we get the gold mania, and it's coming, it's absolutely coming. It might take $1,600 gold, but it's coming. Once people start seeing the triple digit pops on a consistent basis throughout the sector, large capitals large pools of capital are going to flow into the sector. Will it all be forgotten?
Yes, and that's what pisses me off.
Agreed. And the reason we know it'll all be forgotten is because we forget as a society in general. We forget so quickly. Just today it was announced that the U.S. deficit hit $984 billion in 2019. So you want a return on investment. That's a 26% increase in the past year. Let me repeat that. The deficit grew in the past year 26% while we were passing tax cuts. Hey, thank you for my tax cuts. Still had a big tax bill. Would have been a lot bigger. I dare say that it was ill-advised. I recall, and you know what? Where are the Tea Party people? Where is the group that was out there just, railing against the Obama administration? And I have a lot of gripes with the Obama administration. But where is that group? In 2011, there were measures passed in the Congress to reduce the deficit. There were protests everywhere. What happened to all that? Does it not matter when your party is in there? And I'm not asking you, Nick, because I know you kind of lean the way that I lean, more libertarian. I'm asking the public. I'm asking the people that voted in Mr. Trump to drain the swamp. Does it just not matter as long as you get your tax cut and asset appreciation and the stock market keeps you wealthy and rich? Because that's what's happened. This is why people are protesting in Hong Kong, in Chile, in Peru, in Lebanon,
Haiti,
you name it. You
France.
pick a corner of the world, Haiti, France, Brazil, you name it. This is why people are pissed off, everybody. It's because it's so gross. It's so nasty. The inequality is so nasty out there. It's impossible almost for somebody that's starting with less than zero to get a fair shake in this country and more around the world. And it's not sustainable. And again, just like we get the presidents we deserve and the criminals we deserve because of how we act and our awareness, we're getting the protests we deserve right now as a world, as a society.
Yeah,
That's
I don't have a lot to add there. That was, excuse me, smart and well said. And then there's some people that, and I just want to make a distinction, have come into wealth and have built companies really through hard work and dedication and things. And then there's people who are born into it or sleazed their way into it or used the system or holes in the system to get it at the expense of the taxpayer, or who have, in the case of like the Facebooks of the world, in a very real way made people their product to the detriment of the people. And it's something that has to go said, right? I was watching a presentation about it this week and how these social media companies control us. We're always taking out our phone to check the status or whatever, and how that not only has degraded our privacy, but in some ways has affected our freedom. And so when you become the product for someone who like Mr. Zuckerberg, then the animosity just rises, right?
And did he get his ass handed to him by AOC? Listen,
And
Miss AOC,
some Republican lawmakers as well.
Absolutely. No, it was really good stuff. He got it from both sides.
Especially
it was
about
good
the
stuff.
child
And
pornography and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was very well done. And for all the stuff that I disagree with Miss AOC about, I consistently hear the argument that she's dumb and not educated and, whatever. She is far from dumb, because the line of questioning consistently on multiple issues for, a freshman representative is impressive, to say the least. And, I hope some of the things that I disagree with her on, she's able to come around on, because I think that she can be an effective congressperson for us. I'll leave with one more thing about my rant about, it only matters when it's your party that is in power, right? And I wanted to fact check it before I said it because I remembered it, but it's true. In 2011, the GOP-controlled House of Representatives was so angry about spending that they pushed to pass a constitutional amendment that would require balanced budgets. Do you remember that, Nick?
I vaguely remember it, yes.
Yeah, they were willing. This is the one thing, right, that they were willing to make an exception for on the Constitution, right? Let's go ahead and pass an amendment. We have to do it. to require balanced budgets because, of course, President Obama was in office. And so, again, I asked the question. And it's, your response as a person, whoever you are out there, whatever your political leanings tend to be, have an honest response. You can say, yeah, it only matters when my party's in office, or it only matters when the opposition party is in office. But you got to ask yourself what kind of human being you are, if that's indeed the case. Is it about ideas or is it about party affiliation? And the truth is, unless you're wealthy in this world, they're not representing you anyway, regardless of what party you're in.
And it speaks also just to the lies of politicians, right? Because, I mean, wasn't it Trump himself who said he could, like, take care of the deficit in 8 months or something? It was very easy to do. And so if you believe these guys, then, shame on you as well.
Hey, that leads me to my next issue that I want to rant about. We're going to station some additional forces to eastern Syria to protect the people. Oh, no, 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 no. It wasn't the people. It's protecting the oil fields, of course. Oh, man. Nick,
Well,
I'll let you
I,
go off on this one. Look, I'm done with it. I'm
I
done
just
with it.
got
Well,
I'm just going to read you Sturgill Simpson lyrics because
do it.
I've been slipping in a few for the past couple weeks. And so, this is Sturgill Simpson from his last album, A Sailor's Guide to Earth. And the song is called Call to Arms. And it starts off, he was in
Hmm.
the Navy. I've done Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran, North Korea. Tell me, where does it end? Well, the bodies keep piling up every day. How many more of them are they going to send? Well, they send their sons and daughters off to die for some oil to control the heroin. Well, son, I hope you don't grow up believing that you've got to be a puppet to be a man. And so
Mm.
it's,
Mm.
different country, different flavor, protecting the oil, Iraq, mushroom clouds, smoking guns, Saddam Hussein, it's nothing changes, right? Protect that oil.
Mm. And it's not just here. Look at Brexit. What the fuck are we arguing about Brexit? They voted on this twice. The people told you what they want. They
The
want
people told you what they want, even the EU, I think, and God, it's such a clusterfuck. It's hard to
it's
follow. But the EU this week said, fine, go. And then the UK was like, nah, we're not going to vote on it, right? Is that what happened?
That's basically what happened. They're basically saying again, we don't fuck your vote. Oh, we're gonna vote again. Oh shit, you still want to leave? Fuck your vote again. Let's see
Yeah.
how we can maneuver this to make it to where we get the result that we want. I watched, and I encourage everyone to watch this. It's 2.5 hours. It's long, but it's important. I think I watched Edward Snowden on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he gets into a lot of the isms of how politicians are able to deflect criminal culpability through classifications and designations about sensitive material. And he talks about the Patriot Act and the Patriot Act 2. And he talks about both parties. He talks about Dick Cheney. He talks about Nancy Pelosi. He talks about the way that all of that was orchestrated. And he makes it a point that they're so vulgar, right? For everybody that claims to really uphold the Constitution and the party of law and order and all that shit, they're so vulgar and dismissive of the populace and the citizenry that they don't worry about breaking the law. They'll break it and then they'll just change it later to make it to where what they did was legal. And it was really, really, really insightful. It's stuff that at your core, if you pay attention to politics and societal trends and the way things are working out and the inequality around the world and, surveillance and all that, if you pay even a little bit of attention, at your core, you have a hint of it. You have the feeling, even if you can't articulate it. He did a heck of a job of articulating it because, of course, he was a CIA asset. He was one of the people that had access to every word that you've ever typed into a Google search box. It was a fascinating discussion. I'll put a link up. I encourage everybody to, take a bath, do some Epsom salt, and just listen for a little bit. Break it up into multiple days. Fascinating discussion.
I've often railed against the way the media and the government work together as far as sourcing and redacting and a government official that,
Mm.
a redacted line this, that's sensitive information, you can't see it. It's like, come on, man, whose government is it? And then they'll tell you it's national security. Well, national security for what? To go protect the oil? It's like the ruse is up, man. Like you said, light the fucking match. I can't wait.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit more because it's been so light. I thought I accidentally joined Tinder this week, Nick.
Go on.
So I signed up for something. I get this email back, right? And so I'm going to read it, but I'm going to redact in the spirit of redaction, since you mentioned it, the organization that I contributed to. But this is the letter that I got back. Dear Gerardo, I feel so lucky to get to be the person to thank you for your contribution and curiosity on behalf of a world of people seeking free knowledge. What shape does your curiosity take? And how does this organization fit? I was like, ooh. Letter continues. I used to try and guess what motivated you to give. What special spark exists in your mind, connecting you to a global community representing every pursuit and personal history, united by a commitment to keeping said organization going. I was like, whoa, what the fuck did I sign up for? The longer I do this work, the more I realize I can't put your curiosity in a box. At this point, I adjusted myself in my seat. I went and got some water real quick. There is no one singular experience of this organization. Curiosity is as diverse as we all are, and it looks a little different for each of us. So by then, she had me, right? It says, when you use blank organization, I hope you feel even more deeply that it belongs to you. Because without you, and without the love and support of billions of people who come back to us every day, we would be nothing. Thank you for giving blank organization shape and purpose and momentum. Thank you for fitting us into your life. With immense gratitude, Catherine.
So it sounds like Wikipedia to me, but I don't understand.
That's exactly what it is. It's exactly. Was it just me that read that as the best thank you for your donation letter ever?
I mean, it was a
I thought I signed up for Tinder, Nick. I'm not going to lie. It was incredibly well written. It spoke to my curiosity. It talked about my motivation. She was curious about the special spark existing in my mind. I mean, I'm glad you got it on the first guess because I was questioning what I clicked on for.
Well, clearly you can't keep your curiosity in a box. Hopefully you can keep other things inside.
Nick, curiosity is as diverse as we all are. I thought it was the greatest thank you for your donation letter ever, and I thought it would lighten the mood a little bit. Let's take it back to not lightening the mood up a little bit. Let's talk about fucking priests, good priests, being like good cops.
I mean, I can't even know where to start to begin on some of this stuff. So, the article out this week was an investigator finds 43 Catholic priests in Colorado had sexually abused at least 166 kids, right? And so the first question to your mind is, when the fuck is this going to end, right? And how can anybody have any faith or credibility in the Catholic Church? And then you go on to read the details of the article and some of the analysis that goes on with it. And one of these priests abused 63 kids over the course of 21 years. And the Denver Archdiocese moved him around 6 times so he could, they move him around to get away from the congregation where he's raping the kids, right, without ever holding him accountable. They moved him around 6 times.
Disgusting.
Never once restricted his ministry or removed him from ministry or sent him off for genuine psychiatric evaluation or care. Now, I read that to my wife last night, and the first thing out of her mouth was, or called the cops. Like, where are the cops? Why isn't the FBI investigating every diocese in the Catholic Church in the United States? Because clearly there's a fucking pedophile in each one of them. And the Catholic Church isn't doing anything to eradicate them or to hold them accountable criminally or otherwise. So what the hell is going on? And then you'll talk to me just the same way you'll talk to me about police. but they're a Christian institution and the Ten Commandments and they're for good and there's so many good priests. And I'll tell you the same thing I tell you about police. If they were good priests, then they would eradicate the bad priests. And the fact that they're not makes them bad priests. And I don't know how many other ways I can say that. I'm just going to sound like a broken record. But clearly, there is something fundamentally wrong with the priesthood in the Catholic Church. And so you got to start taking away tax breaks. You got to start holding them criminally accountable because you already see that the populace is turning away from them. It's no coincidence that, Pew put out research that Christianity is fast disappearing in the United States, that people are more willing to say that they're agnostic or atheist or have no faith. And it's particularly pronounced two places in Catholics and, no surprise, in millennials, which is a bigger part of the fourth turning that you and I
Hmm.
always talk about. One, millennials just saying "fuck that bullshit" because it's bullshit, right?
Yep.
And two, having the self confidence and the awareness of the world to say that, right? Because if Pew had done this survey in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, we didn't have that collective psyche to say to the person on the phone, I'm a fucking atheist. I'm agnostic. I don't believe in God. It wasn't something you said. But now we're the people who, you went to class for First Holy Communion and you confessed your first sins to, and you had reconciliation and the priest told you to say 10 Hail Marys and then went home and fucked the 10-year-old. It's like, fuck that guy and fuck that institution, right? How can you trust them? And so I just I don't know what else to say. I mean, um yeah, and then so I bring it down to my own life as a non-practicing Catholic, as someone who, bailed on the institution as soon as I wasn't under my parents' roof, right? Stopped going to church. Um,
Guilty. Yeah.
and then I
Same
think
here.
about my own kids, right? Because, you and I talked earlier, we got family, in your case, niece, in my case, daughter getting ready to go to school. And what are the best schools, man? The best schools are Catholic schools. And so you think about that and it's like, you know, I want to send my kid to the best school, but B, I don't know if I can support that institution. And if I do, and these are the conversations that we're having in our household right now, I'm going to have to go to the principal of the school and say, my daughter is never to be alone with a priest at any time. And I have to think to myself that I'm not the only parent that principal is going to have heard that from.
You should not be. And that brings me to the other thing that I'm going to rant about. The way police officers in this country assess a threat. So there was an incident in New Mexico where a veteran police officer pushed a sixth grade girl against a brick wall and shoved her to the ground and then just starts yelling, the officer, stop resisting. There's a video, there's body cam footage of this. She wasn't resisting. She's crying and she's yelling, I'm not resisting. Get off of me. You're hurting me. And so a school official actually walks in on this and says, Officer Christensen, the officer's name is Zachary Christensen, says, Officer Christensen, she is not a threat to yourself or others at this moment. You are not going to use excessive force to get this done. The officer responds, she is a threat, and continued to press his forearm into the back of her neck. And so in the police report, the officer says that the 11-year-old girl assaulted him on the way out. And that was the reason for the response. Luckily, in this case, there was body cam footage. Luckily, in this case, Internal Affairs investigated this and found it to be false. This is a case that involves an 11-year-old girl, and you can see the body cam footage. I'll put a link up to it, that did nothing wrong other than, even by the officer's own report, taking extra milk in the lunchroom, being somewhat disruptive in the classroom a couple of days before, and talking too much. And she stood up on the bus one time as well. And this is what the officer thought was the right course of action. there has to be more accountability. There has to be more oversight. Again, I sound like you on this. I sound like a broken record. You know, when we started this by saying, you know, we keep talking about how not all cops are bad and not all priests are rapists, but it's getting harder and harder to defend you fuckers. Again, my town in Mexico, I've said this a million times. I'm thankful for the fact that there is law and order in this country. It's necessary. It's important. It's critical. But we can do a better job than this, because this is just absolute bullshit. It keeps happening. Every week we're talking about, you know, a person of color or low-income person, regardless of color, getting killed in their home, getting set up, getting drugs planted on them. There has to be more oversight and accountability. And we've talked about this 100 times, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. But just be vigilant and get involved on a local level, everybody. And if it happens in your community, be out there and demand accountability, because this can't continue this way. We're doing our society a disservice. We're doing our students a disservice. We're doing the good police officers that do great work a disservice. So yeah,
I'll beat the horse. I'll beat the horse.
Beat it. Have at it. Tag, you're it.
Yeah, we talked about this thin blue line thing, and I've written a bit about it. How and we talked about it, I think, on the podcast. How just last week I had seen somebody wearing a thin blue line hat, and the thin blue line is like, it's a metaphor. It's a saying that's meant to mean, you know, all the police are united. We hold
snitches get stitches. It's the police version of snitches get stitches, right?
It is the police version of snitches get stitches. And then you read things, as you know, someone we work with, Mr. John Lutz, pointed out to me last week after he listened to the podcast that the New York Police Department have been putting stickers on their patrol cars of a skull with a thin blue line on it. And so if you're a public servant and, you know, police brutality and de-escalation and, quite frankly, just outright breaking the law, murdering people, as we saw in Fort Worth, or, you know, the gun task force in Baltimore, you think there would be a little bit more awareness that says to you, hey, maybe we shouldn't be putting skulls with thin blue lines on our police cars, right? I mean, what message does that send? I'm gonna kill you, and no one is gonna come and help you because all my other cops got my back? Is that the message you're trying to send by putting the thin blue line skull stickers on your patrol car? Because to me, police are supposed to be friendly. And I think I've sung the song for you before, Gerardo. When I was little, we used to sing, walk up to the kind policeman, the very first one you meet, and simply say, I've lost my way. I cannot find my street. You can't go up to a car and feel secure and want to talk to that person if there's a fucking skull sticker on the car. And so you can't do that. I mean, there's got to be just more awareness. And then I'll take it even further, because I read a story out of the wonderful, wonderful, upstanding Baltimore Police Department this week, where they changed the policy about exploiting overtime. And miraculously, when they said you couldn't be on part-time because of a medical injury and still collect overtime, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Miraculously, nearly 24 injured cops went back on the full-time schedule. And so if you got dozens of cops that are, you know, supposed to be the epitome of law-abiding citizens and upholding of standards, et cetera, but that are essentially committing fraud with their own payroll department in a taxpayer-funded department, then, you know, I mean, that's just indicative of all the other things that they're willing to do, right? That's like the opening of the floodgate. Well, we'll cheat on our pay and we'll get extra overtime and we'll protect everybody there, and then, you know, whatever. Then we'll plant BB guns on black kids or whatever it is they think is fun.
And charge them with real felonies.
Crazy, man.
As Mr. Edward Snowden said on that Joe Rogan podcast that we'll put a link up to, you can't ask people to wake up if they're pretending to be asleep. And I have to believe that police departments, the Catholic Church, a lot of our staples in society and institutions that are supposed to be there for good are pretending to be asleep. And so,
Or have some leadership that is really down some rabbit hole stuff, right? Because like my wife was asking, like, why isn't the FBI investigating? Like, I mean, these are quote unquote like people high up in society, right? Bishops and archbishops of dioceses. And then I think about Peter Epstein and Bill Clinton and even Bill Gates last week, the New York Times was writing about, had associated with him multiple times after he was a known juvenile sex trafficker. And it makes me wonder, like, you know, it just makes me wonder.
agreed. I don't want to close this out on this note. So I want to talk about the eradication of polio type 3. And by I want to talk about the eradication of polio type 3, I mean, Mr. Hodge, would you share your insights about the eradication of polio type 3?
So we've already eradicated, and this is what makes it so difficult, right? Because Bill Gates himself was almost single-handedly responsible for some of this, right? We've eradicated, I digress. We've eradicated polio 2, which is very positive. Just this week, um, the doctors announced that we have now eradicated the polio virus type 3 has been eradicated worldwide. And so, we like to do feel good things, and eradicating disease is a very good thing because it still kills disproportionately a lot of people around the world that don't have access to the sort of first world healthcare that we have. And so, the more diseases we can eradicate and the better we understand the biology of disease, the better off we are as a species. And so it was good to see the eradication of polio virus type 3, what they call WPV3, just 4 years after polio virus type 2. And if I remember the article correctly, I believe there's only one strain left to eradicate. So go humans and go science once again.
Go humans, go science, go Bill and Melinda Gates, who co-chaired that effort largely, and a great example of how you can use capitalism for good, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, giving back. What does it say here? Have already produced it, and they pay dividends, right? Has already produced a savings of more than $27 billion in healthcare costs since 1988. Just the reduction of polio cases. So yeah, kudos to Bill Gates in that respect, and many other people have announced that they're going to give away a lot of their net worth. So good on them.
I love it. Before we go, I'd love to get your take on the Fed meeting. Do we see another rate cut? And whether we get another rate cut or not, does it matter for the gold bull market that's coming?
I don't think it matters. I'm not sure we get one next week because I don't think the Fed wants to seem like it's kowtowing to the president, like the NBA kowtowed to China. And so I think there's a bit of politics going on, and also the stock market is back to record highs, which may or may not have slipped past you there. And so, not that the stock market is the economy, of course it's not, but it seems that the Fed likes to keep an eye on that. And so, with earnings ongoing, I think they might want to wait until the next meeting to see how earnings shakes out, what the stock market does, and just what the climate generally looks like. I know that was probably a non-answer, but that's
No,
sort
no,
of my
no, no.
thoughts on it.
That was a great answer. You don't believe the Fed will cut. I'll respectfully take the other side of that. I think you are absolutely correct in stating that the stock market, the major U.S. indices are at record highs. I think that will continue to be the case, but I do think the Fed cuts, and not because of what's going on here so much, but because of the uncertainty around the world and the fact that capital is fleeing into the U.S. at a pretty alarming rate, and it's mostly out of Europe, and it's really out of Germany. And I'm writing about that as we speak for Junior Mining Monthly, so I don't want to put too much out there, but I think there's moves that have to be made by the Fed to accommodate just the lack of growth and the recessionary and deflationary pressures out of Europe. So we'll see. I don't think we get an aggressive cut, but I do see another quarter point coming. To answer the second part of my own question, I don't believe it matters at the end. I think all the central banks are trapped. And I think, I think we're in for a raging bull market in 2020, which will even benefit some of my high risk, high reward, so far all high risk in the past couple of years, exploration stocks that I tend to gravitate towards.
You don't like your debt to be higher than your GDP, Gerardo?
On margin with options? With a
Get
credit
long.
card?
Get long.
That's it. That's it. Mr. Hodge, it's been a pleasure as always. Everybody be kind, be nice, treat each other good, disagree with somebody respectfully. Do all that. It's good for you. This is episode 41 of Bizarro World. I am Gerardo Del Real. Say bye to them, Nick.
Have a good birthday next week, Gerardo. Everybody write in and say happy birthday, Gerardo. I'll see you soon in New Orleans.
The big 41. Doing 40s in style. Happy to be here. We'll see how long I last. Thanks, everybody. If you're in New Orleans, come say hi.
See ya.